We'll get started. It's 10:15. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 MORPC Summit on Sustainability. And this is the breakout session on community action through data. Data can inform the work of the region's communities and partners as we strive towards sustainability goals. More visible data contributes to a shared, evidence-driven understanding of the region's strengths and weaknesses when it comes to sustainability. It illuminates where we can improve and the successes that are worth celebrating. Moving beyond the data and towards progress requires data that engages multiple audiences with varying technical skill levels and specific needs. Our session will preview the new MORPC dashboard, discuss the lessons learned while building tools for public use, and share an example of another region's sustainability dashboard that led to meaningful community action. I'm Harvey Miller. I'm a professor of geography at Ohio State and director of the Center for Urban and Regional Analysis, and I'll be moderating this session. I invite participants in this session to use social media to comment on it. Use the hashtag MORPC Summit, one word. And I also should let you know that professional credits are available through the American Planning Association and AIA. It's self-reporting, but we can provide a certificate if you need it. Okay, so we'll talk today about the MORPC Regional Sustainability Agenda Dashboard. And this came about as a partnership between MORPC and the Center for Urban and Regional Analysis. I believe it actually came about, if I remember correctly, at a MORPC Summit on Sustainability a few years ago when I saw, and several of us at CURA saw the Regional Sustainability Report card and said, let's make that dynamic and web accessible. And we talked to MORPC, and that led to this partnership and also this project, which you're going to see in this session today. So our first speaker will be Natalie Hurst, who is the data analyst at MORPC. And in her section, in her opening remarks, she'll just be discussing the project background and the processes. Next, we'll have Adam Poor, the consulting manager at CURA, the Center for Urban and Regional Analysis. And Adam will be providing a demo of the sustainability dashboard and some insights into the development process. And our last speaker is Katie Zager, a research associate from the UNC Charlotte Urban Institute. Her organization is an applied public policy research center serving the greater Charlotte, North Carolina region. She will be sharing her community dashboard, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Quality of Life Explorer, and how the tool has led to meaningful community action. So we'll start with Natalie, please.
Thank you, Harvey. Yes, as he mentioned, I am Natalie. This project has been a long time coming, so today we are quite excited to launch our Regional Sustainability Dashboard. So the session audience is quite special because you're going to get a first glimpse at the tool. Welcome to this red carpet premiere. So today in my section, I'm going to cover some of the project background and development process. Starting in 2019, MORPC and the Center for Urban and Regional Analysis at OSU partnered to develop a dynamic, interactive web dashboard that aims to show progress towards sustainability in the region. Prior to this, MORPC had developed a regional sustainability agenda, which I'll elaborate on a little more later. We wanted to transform our static document into a regularly updated and easy-to-use resource for the public in hopes it would move the needle on environmental issues in the region. CURA was a natural fit as a partner for this project, given their app development expertise and proven track record for creating high-quality data applications for public consumption. So with MORPC's expertise around the data, metrics, and programs addressed by our agenda, paired with CURA's technical acumen, we are quite pleased to announce the launch of our dashboard today. So with so much time spent hyping this thing up, you might be wondering, what is this tool anyway? Here is a screenshot to give you a little sneak peek of the tool, and I promise you'll get to learn all about the intricacies and inner workings in Adam section. But the important components to grasp for now is that this dashboard provides a complete, accurate, and up-to-date representation of the region's sustainability goals. It's the official tool to track progress for the goals set out in MORPC's Regional Sustainability Agenda, and it's intended for anyone with an interest in sustainability in the region, including planners, elected officials, researchers, the media, the public, and hopefully you. So before I dive too deep into the development process, I wanted to take an opportunity to do some level setting. Given that I'm a data analyst, it will come to no surprise to any of you that I think measurement is important. However, I do come from a long line of skilled trade workers, and I can assure you measurement is not just a data analytics thing. If a carpenter shows up to build a home without a tape measure or a level, you can bet that the resulting project is not going to be much of a success. And the same can be said of most projects we might work on. Without measurement, it's impossible to know where a project is or where it needs to go. And when you're trying to track progress, data is one of your most valuable assets. To fuel any tracking initiative, your data must be readily available, of high quality, and relevant to your project. If your progress tracking is going to be shared with the public, it's also important that it's easily understandable to a lay audience. In the age of big data and all of its advanced modeling techniques, it's important to balance modern data methods with ordinary human judgment. Your machine learning, data fusion, regression model algorithm may sound cool, but if no one besides you understands what it's actually doing, it might not be of much use for tracking progress. This project is a great example of how using data can provide meaningful understanding of progress. The steps we have taken are to attempt to detect if our work in the region has made a difference, and we hope the broad lessons we share today can be integrated into your organization and work efforts. The notion of planning and measurement is certainly not unique to Central Ohio. There are plenty of excellent examples from our event partner in Atlanta, including their urban agriculture work in East Point and the Neighborhood Nexus dashboard. So understanding the importance of measurements and progress tracking, MORPC Sustainability Advisory Committee created our guiding document for MORPC sustainability-focused programming. MORPC is engaged in regional sustainability efforts for decades, and to quantify our progress, we created this agenda. For the first time, we had developed measurable goals, objectives, and targets to get a better understanding of how we are doing as a region. This agenda provided a framework for the Central Ohio community to work towards common sustainability goals. Its 5 goal categories address energy consumption, natural resources, economic opportunity, sustainable neighborhoods, and regional collaboration. Across these 5 goal areas, it has 23 objectives. The first regional sustainability agenda was set for 2017 to 2020, and MORPC is currently working to develop the next version of the agenda. At our 2018 Summit on Sustainability, we released a report card to track and report progress towards the goals of our regional sustainability agenda. We had created a static dashboard in Tableau with a rating system that was applied to the objectives to demonstrate where we are doing as a region and where we can do better. For each of the 23 objectives, we assigned this rating system with these little leaves, and we said that we need to devote more resources, more focus is needed, keep doing what we're doing, or we've accomplished what we've set out to do, but the work continues. The report card was a great first step at investigating where the region stood on the goals the regional sustainability agenda created. However, like any first version of the product, it had a few areas of improvement. So, taking a personal inventory of some of the places we could improve, one component was the timeliness. If you go visit our report card today on our website, you can see it was last updated on October 24th of 2018. So the information could be used to draw conclusions about 2018, but it's difficult to say how we have progressed to the present. Another area of improvement for the report card is that for each metric, the progress is aggregated to the regional level, or at least the area that the data existed for. So say, for example, you visited our report card and wanted to understand how many renewable energy facilities there were for the region. You could get this information, but what if you just wanted to see for Franklin County? That's not something you could glean from the current version of the report card. Another thing we'd like to leaf in the past is our leaf rating system. This was helpful to see progress at a glance, but the process of assigning these leaves was a little bit subjective. We wanted to make our interface more customizable and user-friendly. So just like for the report card, despite the specific reason each person might have for visiting our website, they saw the same view. And lastly, there was limited information in the report card about the source and calculation of each metric, which limited the reproducibility of the information. This may sound like I'm trying to roast the report card, which is not my intent at all. This tool was successful in demonstrating our regional sustainability progress, but we recognized there were opportunities to make an improved public-facing tool. So that's exactly what we did. Building on the strong foundation of the report card, we asked ourselves, what could make this tool better for tracking sustainability progress? Then we did it. We took the RSA report card a step further by developing a dynamically fed dashboard. Some of the intended improvements include dynamic updates when new data is available, the ability to see a county's individual progress towards sustainability objectives, as well as the region's progress in an improved user interface. Moving past the fixed configuration and limited interactivity of the report card, the goal is that our dashboard is highly customizable and a little more interactive. Another perk of this new platform is that we have automated data processing where possible. Rather than having to do repeated analyses each year in Excel, we've used coding software to update the dashboard on many of the metrics. And lastly, this new tool is easy to share. Users can customize their view to see only the objectives relevant to their use case, and then share this version with a web link or on social media. All of these advancements will hopefully provide for greater access to data and information that can be updated more frequently. Our goal is that the tool will empower our members and other community members to feel more comfortable with sustainability. So developing this resource was no small order. Next, I'm going to dive into some of the important feedback elements we integrated into the process. So we all know if you ever want to get something done, the first step is to form a committee. MORPC created our Sustainability Dashboard Working Group to help guide the direction of the dashboard project. This group helped us tailor the tool for public consumption and provided expertise on the best data sources to measure progress. The group contained a mixture of local experts in data and sustainability from the Central Ohio community, and the organizations they represent are here. We have the Ohio EPA, One Columbus, the Urban Decision Group, the City of Upper Arlington, and the City of Columbus. The feedback of this group was critical to our development process. Next, another component we considered was the unique reasons each person might have for using the dashboard, which are also referred to as use cases. Our conversations around target audiences was guided by a project MORPC did earlier to create user personas. To start, I'll define what a user persona is. These are basically just characterizations of key audience or groups that use a product, and creating these allows us to understand who would be using a product and how they might use it. So MORPC produces many data products, and in 2017, we conducted research to better understand who uses the resource and their specific needs. After talking with our peer organizations, conducting focus groups, and disseminating an online survey that was taken by 445 respondents, we synthesized the results and created 7 distinct user personas, all with different data needs and levels of technical expertise. These personas included individuals in the categories of regional planners, jurisdictional managers, engaged members of the public, elected officials, nonprofit employees, project managers at planning and engineering firms, and civic tech enthusiasts. Each of these fictional individuals would visit our dashboard with not only different goals, but different levels of expertise. This figure shows some of the different considerations for each persona. You are welcome to read the descriptions on the screen, but in summary, some of the considerations were whether the data would need to be accompanied by expert guidance, whether the data is needed for a specific question or somebody's just doing general exploratory analysis, whether the data needs to be pre-processed into a visualization, the level of detail needed, and whether the user would like to be able to download the data in a machine-readable format or into a spreadsheet, basically. So in creating our tool, it was really important to us that all these users would be able to use our dashboard and fulfill their desired use case. The report card had the uniform interface I've mentioned a few times for all users, but the dashboard has a few different views. For one, we have a landing page that provides a non-technical overview of the product and progress at a glance in an easy to understand format. Then for our more technical users, the dashboard has graphs and charts galore, plus the option to download data. Rather than being ordered by numbers, the users can arrange the cards with the objectives however they please for the purpose that best fits their needs. With knowledge of the varied groups that use our data, we tried to integrate these unique needs into, integrate these unique user needs into our tool. Another way we have improved on our original product is by integrating extensive user feedback through beta testing. Beta testing is when you allow outside users to try the product prior to the launch and provide input. No matter how great we think the dashboard looks, it's imperative to consider and integrate outside opinions. Beta testing allows for an interruption in the typical software development process to say, hey, wait, what do people actually think about this thing? Once we got the dashboard to a place where we felt comfortable sharing, we conducted 2 rounds of beta testing. The first beta test was with our working group, and then the second group was slightly larger with the MORPC Sustainability Advisory Committee and the MORPC Regional Data Advisory Committee among those that tried the product out. After each round of beta testing, we reviewed the user feedback and prioritized action items. While we couldn't fix every single issue raised, this process of user acceptance testing has ultimately led to an improved final product that you will all get to enjoy. But launching is just the first step. If we build it, people may or may not find it useful, but obviously we hope they will. We've considered different stakeholder feedback, user personas, and user feedback to get an idea of how this tool might be used. However, there's no way we can predict 100% how they're going to use the tool or what people will think of it. So by partnering with the team at Cura, we developed a more technically advanced sustainability dashboard that improves on the foundation of the report card. The new dashboard has changes to reflect upon some of the initial areas of improvement of the report card, but we know there's more work to do. We're launching our product, but seeking continuous improvement on the tool. As it's disseminated, we remain open and amenable to feedback and improvements, and I encourage all of you to provide us with that feedback once it's launched. So our goal is that this product will help MORPC members and Central Ohioans better understand the progress the region is making towards sustainability. And now that you have a better idea of some of the origin and evolution of sustainability tracking efforts at MORPC, I'm going to hand it over to Adam to finally show you the new tool.
All right, thanks, Natalie. That's gonna be a tough act to follow. I'll do my best.
You're gonna do great.
All right, let me try and share my screen. Okay, Natalie, are you able to see my web browser?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, great. Okay, so as Natalie mentioned, I'm going to give you a little tour of the dashboard, and I'm gonna start here from the MORPC website just to let you see how you can access it without having to remember the URL for it. If you go to the morpc.org website and click on the menu over here, go to Tools and Resources. One of those tools is the brand new Regional Sustainability Dashboard. Okay, and there's some intro text here, but I'm just going to skip all that and click this Go to Dashboard link. All right, this is the dashboard. A little bit different than the screenshots you saw in Natalie's slides. We've made some improvements since then, but this is the gist of it. And let me give you a quick orientation. These cards that you see on the right-hand side reflect regional level data. And each card corresponds to one of the objectives in the regional sustainability agenda. If you recall, those objectives were organized by groups. So up here at the top, you can see these icons. Each of the green icons corresponds to one of the groups. So this one is energy consumption. If I click on that, I'll see a card for each of the objectives within that group. And I know I'm going through this pretty quickly, but don't worry, I'll come back and we'll look at some of these in detail. I'm not going to go through all of them, but let me just show you. So if I click on this next one, which is natural resources, you can see now all of the cards have changed, and we're looking at all of the objectives in the natural resources group. Okay, well that's all well and good. Perhaps I am interested in going through theme by theme and looking at the different objectives. But as Natalie mentioned, one of our goals in developing this dashboard was to make things more interactive, more customizable, generally more useful to you specifically. So let me walk you through now kind of a specific use case. It's sort of hypothetical, but sort of not. You can call it the atom poor use case, perhaps. So I'm a data nerd, and I'm also very concerned about climate change and interested in promoting mode shift from automobiles to alternative modes of transportation as a way of reacting to climate change. So let's take a look at the dashboard with that use case in mind. All right, well, there's no goal that corresponds specifically to mode shift. So I am going to customize it. To do that, I'm going to start with one of these groups that only has a few cards so that I can customize them more easily. So here I'm going to click on the header of the card, and I'm going to look through some of these goals, or some of these objectives, sorry, and find the ones that are interesting to me. So I'm interested in mode shift, so I might be interested in learning about vehicle miles traveled and how that's trending, how much people are driving. So let me add that. All right, now you're seeing here a chart showing the regional level data for real vehicle miles traveled. I'm going to add a couple more. So another one that I might be interested in is the rate at which commuters are choosing alternative modes. So I'm going to select this goal, 1.2b, which is focused on commuters using transit, biking, and walking. And then one more, just for good measure, I'm going to add 1.4, increased greenway miles traveled, as another measure of how people are adopting cycling. So you may have noticed that you can change the contents of each card by clicking on these headers, and you can also add new cards by using this big plus button. You can also remove cards by clicking on this X here. All right, so now we have some regional level data that's interesting to me, at least. Let's take a look at it. I'm going to focus on this commuters selecting alternate modes. So some things you should know about the cards. Well, first of all, there's some stacked bar charts on this one. And if I hover over them, you can see more detail about what that bar or the section of the bar represents. So now I'm looking at percent of commuters walking, and the percent is 2.2 for the time period 2009 to 2013. So pretty typical of this sort of dashboard. You can also see that there's these two horizontal lines. There's the red one, which represents the target line. That's the target as defined in the Regional Sustainability Agenda, which was written back in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And then there's also a baseline, which was either stated explicitly in the Sustainability Agenda, or we inferred it based on how the target was defined. So you can see in this case, you might wonder, well, why is the baseline, why is the data not even at the baseline? And that's because we've shown only a subset of the data. So we may not be seeing the data that drove that baseline. But anyway, you can see, well, for these years that are shown, we're falling short of the target. So we have still more work to do in this, for this particular objective. Okay. You might notice as I hover over these bar charts that data appears on the map. And so what you're seeing over there is a set of symbols whose area is proportional to, in this case, the percent of commuters walking in that county. So obviously the counties with small circles have fewer percent of commuters walking, and counties with large circles have more percent of commuters walking. So as I move my mouse around, that data changes, the data that's shown on the map. If I want to fix it there, I simply click on the feature I'm interested in. And you can see that it turned red, and now it persists on the map. And I can move my mouse over to the map and see the specific data for each of the counties. Okay, another kind of cool feature is, say you're, well, first of all, if you look down at this legend here with the small circle and the large circle on the axis, you can see a set of sticks in between them, a set of vertical lines. Those represent each of the counties. You can think of them as circles that have been turned on their, turned about the y-axis. So you're almost looking at the edge of the circle. And so you can see their distribution in the range. So Knox County, I think that's probably the biggest circle, is way over here on the axis. And you can see that most of the features are clustered toward the lower end of this. If I click and drag on this axis, it creates a filter window. And you can see that the features that fall within the filter window remain filled with the color, and the features that are not within the filter window become empty, or just open circles. And I can move that filter window around, and I can also change its size. Okay, so that kind of shows you how you can get one view of the county level data. But what you don't get in this view is the temporal trends in each county. By the way, to remove the data from the map, you can just click anywhere. You can get some feel for the temporal trends just by flipping between the different time periods on the chart. But let's say you wanted to dig a little bit deeper. You could also download the data. So that's what this icon here does. And you're presented with this download dialog, and there's a few options. You can download the data that's shown on the chart. That's the region level data in two forms, CSV or Excel. So you just pick the form you're interested in here and then click download. And you can also download the county level data. That's also available in tabular form. And also spatial formats. So GeoJSON and shapefile, those are two formats that you might consume in GIS software or web maps. We plan to also offer a KML format that you can use with Google Earth. However, we're having a little bit of trouble with that right now, so it's not available. But right now, I'm just going to select Excel and click download. Okay, and it asks you where you want to put it. And now you can see I have a new Excel file with my data. Okay, I'm not going to get too far into this. I just wanted to show you how you can see the temporal trends for the counties. So unfortunately, we don't have county names in this table just yet. We just have their IDs, which you can look up on the census website. But hopefully we can include the name in a next release, future release. But let me just filter. I happen to know that Franklin County is this code right here, 049, 39049. And so now if I graph this data, I can see a temporal trend. I can see that in Franklin County, the percent of commuters biking has decreased a little bit in these two time periods. Transit, that has also decreased, but it looks like commuters walking has increased a little bit. So that's just a way that you can take the data that underlies the dashboard and use it for your own purposes in ways that weren't envisioned by the dashboard. Okay. So going back to the dashboard, there's something I forgot to mention. You might notice that some of this content is cut off. We've got this narrative text here that explains the objective and also a legend that explains what each of these bars corresponds to. And if I click this information button up here or the read more button, you can see more detail. You can see the full narrative text. You can see the full legend text. And also important, you can see links that have been curated for this particular objective. The first one is always a link to the metadata, which I'll show you in a minute. There may or may not be additional links below that point you to other relevant data. So I'm going to quickly look at the metadata. As I mentioned, I'm a data nerd, and Natalie was selling the metadata pretty hard too. So I wanted to mention what's available. Essentially, we have a Python notebook, a Jupyter notebook. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. When you click on that link, you'll see a website that looks like this, which is an export from a Jupyter notebook. And it explains the different input data sources. You can see that this data came from the American Community Survey, from the census. And you can see the definitions of all of the fields included in the input data, the fields that are included in that output data that I just exported. And then maybe most importantly, you can see the exact method by which we computed the indicator or the objective values from the raw data. So you can see here's a Python script that you can download it, you can repeat the analysis, you can modify it to suit your needs if you're interested in that kind of thing. And this sort of documentation exists for every indicator on the dashboard. Currently, the Jupyter notebooks themselves are not available, but I will make them available in the future. And if you need access to one immediately, for whatever reason, feel free to ask about it and we'll make sure you get it. All right, so I am out of time. There's just one more thing that I wanted to show you, which is that you might have noticed that there's a really cryptic string in the URL here. And that's important because it allows you to share your exact view of the data. So I've now messed with my previous view. So let me customize a new view. I'm going to customize it so that there's just these two objectives being shown. Now, if I copy and paste this indicator, or sorry, if I copy and paste that URL, you'll see the exact view that I had on my screen. And so if you find some information that might be interesting to one of your friends or colleagues, you can easily share that with them. And that's made easier still by this link here, which will take you to a share dialog that lets you share via email or social media. And I think that's those are most of the big features. So I am out of time, and I'm going to hand it over to Katie.
Let me get my screen shared. All right, everyone can see the PowerPoint, correct? Awesome. So, hi everyone, I'm Katie Zager. I'm a research associate at the UNC Charlotte Urban Institute, here to talk to you about the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Quality of Life Explorer. So before I begin, I'll tell you a little bit about the Institute. The UNC Charlotte Urban Institute is a nonpartisan applied research and community outreach center, seeking solutions to the social, economic, and environmental challenges of our communities. We do this by focusing on several areas. They are our integrated data system, the Institute for Social Capital, our survey and research services, outreach and engagement, a focus on regional policy, and finally through our community indicators work, such as the Quality of Life Explorer. Today, I'll be focusing on the partnerships that make the QOL Explorer possible, talk a little bit about the audience, and give some examples of how the Explorer has been used. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about where QOL is headed next with a focus on equity. So the Quality of Life Explorer has deep roots in Charlotte. It originated as a quality of life study in the early 90s and was compiled as a written report up until 2012, when we dramatically increased the scope and the geography and then moved everything online. So currently the QOL Explorer has over 80 variables on 462 neighborhoods throughout Mecklenburg County. The data covers approximately 2012 to the present, depending on availability. And then finally, it's a broad data set. So the 9 dimensions we cover are character, economy, environment, education, engagement, health, housing, safety, and transportation. Thought it'd be fun to talk about some of our most popular indicators for the month of October, which are bicycling and voter participation. And I like to think this is related to people's interest in the election. And then also the city hosts Bike Charlotte Week in October. So it's like people are gravitating towards our dashboard for that. The QOL Explorer is the result of a partnership between UNC Charlotte, the City of Charlotte, and Mecklenburg County. Each partner plays a unique role. So the city kind of manages a lot of the community outreach, especially through their regular interaction with neighborhood councils, seeking grants and information. They also handle data, such as subsidized housing units that are already tracked in city databases. Mecklenburg County mainly contributes custom web development through the GIS department, and they also help us coordinate with the 6 towns in our county. I also thought I should mention that we are prolific users of the county's open data website. So although it's not a formal contribution, having that data available is really invaluable to our work. And then finally, UNC Charlotte, we're responsible for the data aggregation, processing, some research, and then campus outreach. And then finally, we have a steering team that we consult with every few months. It's made up of representatives from the nonprofit, communications, and business world. So the goal of the QOL Explorer is to make data more accessible and easier to understand for community members, researchers, and policymakers. They have slightly different needs in that community members are often focused on their specific neighborhood or service area, while researchers and policymakers are more interested in the big picture. So whereas seems like Ohio has lots of user personas, we're still kind of concentrated on 2 right now. But one way we kind of made our data available to both groups was kind of for our community members. We have a downloadable report where with the click of a button, you can get a PDF snapshot of the current conditions in your neighborhood. We've been told this is especially useful for organizations applying for grants. And then we also have then the data download available for researchers where they can see every indicator for every variable for the entire time period. And then part of what kind of makes QOL really valuable is that we're building this longitudinal data set so researchers can actually run correlations, create indices, and look at change over time. Sorry, okay. So the data presented in the QOL Explorer showcases real-world impacts. For example, one of our indicators is tree canopy, which has been in the news lately, both locally and nationally. So one of the reasons I decided to talk about tree canopy today is because I actually got a call from our local weather reporter who had read this article in the New York Times and wanted to know if the same could be true in Charlotte. Is there a relationship between race and tree canopy? So using the QOL Explorer, with just the click of a few buttons, we were able to say, yeah, probably. So here we can see that Charlotte has, this familiar pattern that we refer locally to as the crescent and the wedge, that applies to a number of variables such as race, socioeconomic status, and as we can see from these maps, it also applies to tree canopy. With this tree canopy variable, however, we at the Urban Institute are not really the drivers of the policy or even the originators of the data. Rather, we kind of sit in this ecosystem where through community partnerships and connections, we're able to amplify the work done by other organizations. So we can see here, the nonprofit Tree Charlotte are the ones out there conducting tree plantings and funding this tree canopy study. The geographers next door to us, the UNC Charlotte Geography Department, then use the tree study to do remote sensing work and additional data processing. And our role at the Urban Institute, and through the QOL Explorer and written articles and such, is to really help inform the community, who then help the city set specific goals around tree planting and preservation that Tree Charlotte attempts to carry out. We're also using QOL data this year in our Data Walks program. So for years, the Urban Institute has conducted neighborhood walking tours called City Walks or Jane Walks, where people kind of get together and learn more about the community. So this year, we're taking it a step further by adding a data element where people can better assess conditions in their neighborhood. So we're creating an app that will use a lot of the QOL data along with key statistics from the Explorer. So we're focusing on place-based indicators such as sidewalk availability or grocery store accessibility that relate directly to policy decisions. So kind of here's an example of the data we might talk about on our data walk. So here we can see that neighborhoods in the black square have a high utilization of food and nutrition services, yet low access to chain grocery stores, while the neighborhoods in the gold oval have almost no food stamp utilization, but considerably more access to grocery stores. So here we can see an equity issue present in our data. But as primarily a data provider, a dashboard such as QOL is somewhat limited in what we can provide. The dashboard isn't a magic wand or a crystal ball. It requires critical thinking and community members to actually take action. Oh. So as you can see, issues of equity and policy keep coming up again and again. In line with a more national conversation, we're starting to discuss how equity ought to be reflected in our indicators work. So for the past 8 years, the QOL Explorer has really shied away from any sort of official benchmarking. It's really a matter of our data set is just very broad, and neighborhoods really do not like being labeled. We do, however, provide the data needed for neighborhoods or organizations to set their own specific goals around things, such as bicycling or tree canopy. We are having a discussion here at the Urban Institute, however, about trying to figure out what product will best suit our needs. And not to get too philosophical here, but what role as a data provider and storyteller our organization needs to play. One thing we have decided on, however, is to focus on place-based indicators versus people-based indicators such as education, income, or socioeconomic status. The question we always want to remain focused on is how do we make a place more equitable? What additional data do we need? So that being said, we are starting a community feedback process this fall. But based on the work that's been done already, I will say that probably about a third of our potential indicators for this project are coming straight from the Quality of Life Explorer. So kind of to sum everything up, we have become a go-to resource for our community, regularly being cited in news and in reports. We have been busy identifying ways to use the QOL data in new and interesting ways outside and inside the dashboard. And then finally, we've learned that we need to be more explicit about the importance of racial equity in our community and are starting the process to do that. So with that, I will pass the conversation back to Natalie for some discussion.
Actually, I'll take that
Thank
role.
you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Harvey.
Yeah, so this is great. All three presentations are great. Really enjoyed seeing how MORPC kind of approached this. Demonstration by Adam, fantastic. Kira does incredible work, as I know. And Katie, your experience in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, has been really interesting. So I want to start a question with you, Katie. What impact has this had? You've talked about some of your activities and outreach and how you're a go-to site for data. Do you see change in your community because of this? And how did you craft, if so, how did you craft this so that it would create change?
Like I said, we know there's organizations, like I said, we don't do benchmarking ourselves, but I know as a fact there's organizations that are out there doing this sort of project. So for instance, QOL has been heavily incorporated into the Livable MEC plan, which is working with specific organizations to achieve specific goals. And so they produce a progress report every year. And so, we're able to see things like, increasing the number of jobs in certain neighborhoods. So really, we tried to focus on indicators that could be updated frequently, had kind of wide community coverage, and that we knew there were organizations working on. And so I think by kind of having those three kind of criteria in place, we're able to make sure that our indicators reflect what's happening in our community and change that's actually taking place.
Excellent. So what lessons do you have for this crew here in Columbus moving forward? And then I'm going to ask them what plans they have, but I want to hear what you would tell Natalie and Adam and me.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're off to a great start with the user personas and the usability, and I have a whole bunch of questions for Adam, because kind of as we're thinking about the next generation of QOL, it's starting to look a lot more like the cards in the dashboard that you all have. So I think the more you can make this a sustainable longitudinal data set, the more useful it will be. And we've had issues with, data's available some years and then the census is late coming out with it, or it looks a little different. So that's just something to stay on top of, and don't be afraid to add indicators as things come up. That's part of the beauty of having something online over time, is that you don't have to limit yourself in what you cover.
Excellent, thank you. Natalie, where do you see this going? Ideally, what would you like to see with the impact on the community, and what paths do you see forward to that?
Yeah, I think one really cool thing that I like about the Quality of Life Explorer is how you can drill down to the neighborhood level. I think that could be a really powerful tool for the community to be able to say, like, how am I doing in Upper Arlington or Whitehall? And just to know, like, yeah, exactly how they're doing on those indicators. I will say, though, like, being the person who curated all the data for this, that doesn't always exist. And even the county level was sometimes hard to come by. So I guess in my dream world, I guess like there would be more data at a more granular level that people could then use to make draw more actionable insights on about their communities and where they live.
And how about you, Adam? You have experience in development here. You've also have a master's in city regional planning, so you're knowledgeable in things urban. Well, how would you like to see this tool used?
Well, I really like the customizability of it, and I would like to continue improving that, with the end goal being that everyone can define for themselves what their view of sustainability in Central Ohio looks like. So the MORPC sustainability agenda is great, and I think it's there were a lot of participants in that process, so I think it kind of captures the goals for the region really well. But people have different priorities, and so I like that people could keep track of the things that are important to them.
Okay, there's a question in chat. I'm going to ask that about the software. What software did you use for the MORPC dashboard? And also, Katie, I'd like to hear what you used there in Charlotte.
Sure. So the dashboard is entirely custom built. We do make use of open source libraries. But I would say the only kind of pre-packaged solution that we made use of was the Jupyter Notebooks, which is an open source software package for Python. Essentially what we did is we used Leaflet for the mapping and D3 for the charts. Those are open source JavaScript libraries. And and then we kind of stitched those together to build the front end. And on the back end, I didn't talk about this at all, but we have a very kind of general purpose and flexible data ingestion pipeline on the back end of this thing that we built custom using Python and some Python frameworks.
And the decision to go open source was explicit, right? I mean, you chose that path for a reason.
Yes, to make use of open source technologies. We've also been having discussions about making the underlying code for the dashboard open source, and I think we're there in spirit, but we need to talk about the logistics of how to make that happen within the MORPC and OSU legal frameworks.
Mm-hmm. Katie, what choices did you make down there in Charlotte?
Yeah, so ours is very similar. Ours is also open source, built using Leaflet and Mapbox and all these kind of existing tools. And so our code is open source and up on GitHub for anyone to use. So that's, if you look at Durham has a neighborhood compass dashboard that actually looks very similar to ours because they share the base code. So yeah, if you go to our dashboard, mcmap.org/QOL, there's a little GitHub link. But also the back end of ours is also very flexible. Everything, I do things in Python and code it on my end, but it basically spits everything out in a standardized CSV format that the dashboard can then read.
Now, for both you and Adam, what are the major lessons you would give to somebody who is starting a dashboard from scratch? Like if you're going to start over today, what would you have done differently, or what would you do the same?
We spent a lot of time focusing on the nitty-gritty of the user interface. Early on, we chose to go the completely custom route, with the exceptions I mentioned. because we view this as part of a larger, an effort to create a larger urban observatory focused on sustainability. And we wanted that flexibility of being able to tweak things exactly how we like them. In hindsight, I might have selected an existing dashboard platform. For example, Plotly is one that I'm aware of. I've never used it, but I'm aware of that. And I think that might constrain you to some extent, but it means that a lot of the hard decisions have already been made for you. And so you can spend less time worrying about the nitty-gritty.
How about you, Katie?
Yeah,
What's your big lesson?
Yeah, I'd say we had a pretty similar experience. And that's where kind of in the nitty-gritty of dashboard version 3.0 now. Like I said, looks very similar to Ohio's. But we are starting to make use of open source software that don't require a web development background as part of our other projects. So like R Shiny is one that we've been starting to use. It's not nearly as flexible as the custom stuff that we've been able to build. But I think packages like that, especially for researchers, are a good entry point into the dashboard world. And again, it's all free and open source, which is always a plus.
Right. Very good. This is for the entire panel. Maybe we'll start with Natalie. What do you think was the biggest challenge in this? I mean, you're creating a publicly facing dashboard that public officials with diverse opinions, diverse audiences are supposed to be using. So what was the biggest challenge? It's not just technical, is it?
I tried to hit the space bar to unmute myself, but apparently I have to do Alt A and the space bar, but I got it. I would say kind of on two fronts it was difficult. One thing for me, like I am like a first generation college student and most of my family like is of a non-technical background. So I always think it's important to try to create a product for kind of like the least technical person. I always try to like think of like, would my grandma be able to use this product? And that can be difficult to try to create a product for somebody like that because, they might have issues like even using the computer. Like, I mean, my grandma can get on the internet, but, just trying to think of like, would somebody with like a limited technical background be able to use this tool? So I think that forced us to kind of like evaluate our planning process along the way. And I would say the other big challenge I faced that I touched on earlier was the data availability. And I would also say expectations about data availability, especially like trying to work with a working group, not to say that they were like difficult to work with or anything, but there would be certain metrics that I would say like, okay, like I've done like a lot of research and like here are like the data sources that I'm like saying that we would be able to choose from. And a lot of times they would be like, well, like, have you considered this option? Or like, what if we did some sort of like spatial analysis of like orthos? Or I think there was a lot of like hope and expectations for like, if we didn't have a data source, being able to make one that, we just didn't have the capacity to do trying to launch this product. So I would say just trying to balance like the lack of data with like potential expectations people might have to be able to see very granular data or like high quality data for some of the things.
Adam and Katie? What do you think was the big challenge? Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
I'd like to kind of echo what Natalie said. Just the wide variety of users and their different expectations is always an issue with us. And one thing we've noticed, especially among elected officials and those in the business community, is as dashboards have become more prevalent, everywhere in business, they expect data to be updated like daily. And we really have to communicate that government data doesn't work like that, that it's normal to be, 1 to 2 years behind. The updates might be less frequent, and then trying to direct them to appropriate data sources if they are looking for something else. So yeah, I'd say managing expectations is a big one for us.
Always, every project. So let's look forward to the future. I mean, we are seeing new data sources. For example, cheap sensors, air quality, humidity, temperature. We're seeing citizen sensing, citizen science. Look out 5 years. Where would you think a dashboard like this would be? Where would you like it to be 5 years or so from now? In terms of like what kind of data, what kind of decisions you'd like to support? Are there new ways you think that we'll be interfacing with data in the future? I kind of want you to be a little speculative here.
Yeah, I'll start with this one. Kind of to the idea of like cheap air quality sensors. One thing we did consider for this was including like purple air sensors and yeah, allowing different types of crowdsourcing. Maybe it's not purple air, but different like citizen water quality testing. I think that would be something that would be really cool to include in the dashboard, but it's difficult to balance I guess the expectation piece of, you know, like putting a big disclaimer that like this is not an authoritative source, like, you know, like if you want to follow this, great, but like you should probably back it up with like federal regulatory monitors, or, you know, just know that like you might want to take it with a grain of salt. But I think that would be a really cool direction for the dashboard to move in, of having the authoritative data where possible, and then also supplementing that with a little bit less authoritative data. But I'd be curious to hear Adam and Katie's thoughts.
So would I. Adam?
Yes, I agree. I think that follows in line with the idea of customizability that I was talking about earlier. Maybe in addition to non-authoritative data, we could even allow user-contributed data. And of course, there's a lot of challenges around that, you know, making sure that the data is high quality, or having at least some way of rating the quality to make sure people understand what they're getting. A conversation that we've had at Cura a few times is, what if we could allow people to focus on specific indicators, and then we could analyze what people are interested in, and build this sort of meta indicator to understand how different people feel about sustainability. And I think that would, you know, rather than having this top-down view, we could really understand how the community feels about it, and also build some collective wisdom about it.
Great. Katie, how about down in Charlotte? What do you think you'll be doing with this about 5 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, if I could get neighborhood level air quality data, that would really, really be the dream. It's hard to think 5 years out. I know that, you know, 1 to 2 years out, we're starting to think about looking at data at different scales, just because what is and isn't available at the neighborhood level. And then, yeah, kind of this, you know, we've always kind of floating ideas around about, you know, like, you know, citizen contributed data. So, you know, people have asked us, well, you know, why don't you use geotagged tweets as a data source or things like that? But also, you know, figuring out how to incorporate big data maybe into our data sources. So there's, you know, a lot of point level, you know, business data and location data that's out there. So kind of figuring out how to, again, get more data, useful data at the neighborhood level without being creepy about it is always a concern.
Right, of course.
So yeah, I think just the ability to add more data is always a plus. And then again, keep building this longitudinal data set. So, you know, a lot of our variables really haven't changed much over the past 8 years. Some have, especially around housing. But I think just 5 years from now, being able to, you know, say, here's what did you, look at these longer term variables and see what has changed.
Right, there's definitely value in that, being able to see how this changes over time as a long-term investment in regional data infrastructure and understanding. So we have about a minute left, so let me just go around and just ask for, like, what was the biggest lesson learned from everyone on the panel? Natalie, biggest lesson.
Wow.
Just one.
Just teamwork makes the dream work. Thank God for Adam, because I couldn't do a lot of the stuff he did.
Okay.
Well, and I'll reciprocate that and just say it's been great working with Natalie and with the team at MORPC. I feel like Cura and MORPC work together really well, and that's not a lesson learned. I wasn't surprised by that or anything, but I hope we can collaborate more in the future.
And we tested that relationship and it worked out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Katie, what's your biggest lesson from your experience in this project? Your
I
project?
think 8 years into this, it's that we can't let it get stale. We have to keep finding new ways to incorporate new data or find new ways to use our existing data. Or else, yeah, we don't want it to just kind of turn into background noise or fall off people's radar. And so, yeah, kind of after we've made this initial investment, just finding ways to keep investing as much as
Great.
we can.
That's a great forward-looking note in which to end our session because we're out of time. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Adam, for a very interesting session. Thank you for participants for your time. We have about a 15-minute break now, and then there'll be a closing plenary at 11:30, and I hope to see you there. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Harvey.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Have a great day,
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.